Pumping Nylon has been out for about 10 years now. Probably one of the best-selling guitar books in the classical guitar world, you know. And would you change anything or add anything to the book at this point? Or do you have any new ideas about technique and technique development that you'd put in there?
Yeah, that was published, I think, in '95.
Yeah.
There are definitely things I would add. The stuff that's in there I would leave. It took almost 2 years to just compile, even though the book is not that thick.
Mm-hmm.
It took a while to compile everything because I didn't have a computer at the time. I mean, I was just doing it all by hand and literally cutting musical samples and taping them into the pages. So it took forever. So I would leave everything in there that's there. I would add stuff. I would change little things like the way it appears, the printed page. Some of the print is a little too small for my taste. I would go back and change to fit the Giuliani studies in, for instance, in the back of the book. Mm-hmm. I kind of divided the Giuliani right-hand studies into different groups. The way I saw them to be sort of, you know, into similar groups rather than what Giuliani had. So we put those in the back of the book, and to fit them in, they had to make the print really small, because what I found out at the time was to publish a book that's staple is a much different cost from a book that's spiral bound, and is much different still from a book that has a glued spine. So we had to stick to the stapled version, and the pages were limited, so we had to really condense the print.
Yeah.
I would go back and change that. I would make it a thicker book, or maybe even 2 volumes, and there are other things I want to put into. But we'll get to redo it at some point here.
Yeah.
I've just been busy with other things.
Can you talk about some of the things that you would add at all, or?
I would expand on some of the things that I already have in there. For instance, how to apply, as a classical player, how to apply some of the flamenco techniques to the way we play. Instead of just having samples and say, practice this, it'll make you better, actually having a few pages at least to talk about how that applies to us as classical guitarists. I would expand on some of the left-hand gymnastics, right-hand gymnastics that I have in there. Again, it was just a matter of the number of pages were limited, so I would just basically add to what I have already. And also I would talk a little bit about, this might be a separate book though, I would talk a lot about how to practice. Talk a lot about how to perform and how important it is to play for people and have fun doing it, and not to see it as some, you know, something to fear.
Yeah.
I would talk a lot about those things. So a lot of it wouldn't be music, it would be just, you know, philosophical, I suppose.
Yeah. Speaking of performing, you've been a professional performer for a while now. How have the audiences changed over the years, and what do you think the future of classical guitar is?
Well, look, the future's looking bright. I meet and our quartet, we run into composers all the time that are writing just such great music. Composers who are beginning and trying to write great music, and will, I think, in the future, that we run into. And the playing is the level is just going up and up in the young players that I see, which is just, I think, a natural state in evolution. I think that it just happens in any field, sports, playing an instrument,
Yeah.
You know, you name it. I think things just are meant to evolve. And classical guitar playing certainly has evolved. I'm really happy that I don't have to enter any competitions with some of the players that are entering competitions now.
Yeah.
You know, it's a different playing field. You know, I'm not saying it's any better. I'm not saying it's what we did, you know, back in the day when I was in competitions was any more dated or rustic. It just the playing has evolved to a state where I think players now approach playing music with fewer boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, I think probably because they've heard people do it in the past, and so it makes it possible for them. Look at Paco de Lucia. You know, prior to him, you had Nino Ricardo, Sabicas, and all the old great players, and suddenly he comes along, does something different, and people's minds kind of went, you know, oh, that makes sense. And it kind of evolved from there.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have people able to play stuff that the older generation would never even think of playing,
yeah.
or maybe even probably weren't able to play physically, just because one guy took it up. So I think evolution is a natural state. So I think the future looks pretty good.
Yeah. Do you think there is one guitarist, like for classical guitar, that had the same function as Paco de Lucia did for flamenco, or?
No, but there have been several. I think. I mean, over the years. I mean, first we saw Manuel Barrueco come. He was the first real shocker. You know, I think when he came on the scene, I remember getting his the old Vox. Back then, his recordings were on Vox Turnabout record label, on LPs, the Villalobos Etudes and the Chavarri pieces and the Scarlatti Sonatas, etc. And they just blew everybody's mind. I mean, this kind of playing really hadn't been heard. It was different style. Then you had David Russell coming along, and around the same time, and a different style still, but. Gosh, I'm trying to think of names here. There've been a lot in both playing and pedagogy, I think.
Yeah.
Also, teachers are forced to really, I think, rethink the way they have taught over the years because of the players that have come up out of the old traditional ways. You know, out of Shearer and out of Jose Tomas, where Russell comes from. Those are all very traditional ways of teaching, and I think even the teaching's evolved because of that. But I certainly think Manuel and David Russell have started really the whole movement of, you know, playing a little differently than the old Segovia school, let's say.
Yeah.
And there have been different players since then too, younger generation of players. So it continues.
Yeah.